So, Resident Evil 5. It's time to review this one. So, Resident Evil 5 came out in 2009 on the PS3 and Xbox 360 and has been ported over to a few other consoles following its release. The game also does have two sets of DLC, Lost in Nightmares and Desperate Escape. So, let's take a look at Lost in Nightmares first because chronologically it takes place first. So, the story so far is that, you have the T-Virus outbreak in the Arklay Mountains, the Spencer Mansion, and then later on in Raccoon City. This is, of course, Resident Evil 0, 1, 3, and 2. Then, of course, you have the events of Code Veronica, where Claire and Chris are, trying to stop these evil twins. And then you have Umbrella's downfall. And then, of course, the events of Resident Evil 4, where Leon has to investigate a strange village and, of course, rescue the president's daughter who was kidnapped by a cult. This is the story so far. So Resident Evil 5 basically kind of builds off quite a lot of this. Then there's also Revelations, which isn't really too important, but I did review this one a bit back. So Resident Evil 5 focuses on a enhanced Los Plagas and a new virus called Ouroboros. It also focuses on Chris Redfield and Sheva Alomar investigating a arms dealer in West Africa and eventually finding out that Chris's old partner Jill is still alive. Jill, of course, went missing years prior when her and Chris were tracking down Oswald Spencer and found out that Wesker was also in the place that Spencer was hiding in. This, of course, causes a fight and leads to Jill and Wesker supposedly dying. Years later, Chris finds out that Jill might still actually be alive and begins a search for her along with Sheva. This, of course, brings them in the path of Irving, the arms dealer, Wesker, and, of course, Excella, the leader of Tricell, who kind of is partnered with the BSAA. Resident Evil 5 shifts away from the action, from the survival horror of the previous Resident Evils and focuses more on action like Resident Evil 4 did. This caused a shift with the community and still kind of does. I'll get into my thoughts about that later, but right now we're capping off the story. And so the story is pretty much just that Chris and Sheva have to save the world from Wesker as he gets his ideas from comic book villains. That's basically the story. Desperate Escape does show how Jill and Josh did escape, and it's a bit of an unneeded DLC, but it's still kind of cool. So, how good was this game? Is Resident Evil 5 a fun game, or was Resident Evil 5 best forgotten? Resident Evil 5 is a fun game. It's one I thoroughly enjoyed, and I do think it deserves more attention. While the story itself is somewhat okay compared to other Resident Evil games, it is still fun to experience, and the new enemies themselves were also pretty fun too. Bringing back Las Plagas and villains like Wesker was also pretty cool too, and I feel like it is a neat send-off to one of the best villains in the series. While there's not much horror in this game, there were some moments that are generally spine-chilling, such as the reintroduction of the Lurkers and some of the more mutated enemies like the Big Magini. Especially the part with the alligators. While Resident Evil 5 is flawed, it is still a pretty fun game, and I do like the gameplay, and I do like the Mercenaries mode that makes its return once again. I think this is probably the best Mercenaries mode in this series, and I'm hoping that they keep it if Resident Evil 5 gets a remake. As for the new characters, I liked him. Trevor's a pretty cool character, and Irving was a pretty decent antagonist, a bit silly for my liking, but, his boss fight was pretty cool. The DLC itself is also pretty nice too, especially since it does kind of give off older Resident Evil vibes, especially with this one Easter egg in it. While Resident Evil 5 is a flawed game, I still do recommend it. I think the story for the most part is fairly well. It's not it's really not the best story in the Resident Evil series compared to some of the other games, but it's still a pretty good one, and it's one I've been happy to replay quite a few times. As for issues with the game, the item system is definitely not the best. I think Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 6 had better item management options, and the fact that you can't move while aiming is also kind of an issue too. But for the most part, the game itself is generally really fun, and going back to Mercenaries Mode, I really did like that one, as the characters that came back, like Barry and Rebecca, was a pleasant surprise. While they're not in Resident Evil 5, it is nice to know that Capcom did still care about them. And, well, that's really all I have to say for Resident Evil 5. But before I do go, I do want to thank everyone for getting the channel to 100 subscribers. That's honestly really cool and something I never really expected to happen. So thank you all for that. I'm also currently planning other videos to celebrate 100 subscribers. I have a few on mine, but any suggestions are welcome, provided that it is something I could, more likely do. Can't even think of the word I was gonna say. But of course, thank you for watching and have a wonderful night.